morning, you're watching A News. I'm Lee Brown. Here are the top stories. The manhunt for the shooter that killed conservative activist and Trump ally Charlie Kirk is underway, with the FBI offering a reward for information. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky urges allies to rethink air defense after Poland drone intrusion. And Belarus frees 52 prisoners after Trump appeal, with the US easing some sanctions on Minsk. The FBI has released photos of a person of interest in the fatal shooting of conservative activist Charlie Kirk. Investigators said the suspect, described as college age, climbed onto a rooftop at Utah Valley University before firing the fatal shot, then jumped off and fled into a nearby neighborhood. A rifle, ammunition, and trace evidence were later found in a wooded area close to the scene. On the released photos, suspected gunman is seen wearing a black long-sleeve top with a bald eagle and US flag design, along with sunglasses and a dark baseball cap. Utah's governor urged the public to help, noting more than 7,000 tips have already been received, though officials warned of false claims spreading online. The FBI has offered a $100,000 reward for information leading to an arrest. The suspect's identity is still unknown. Kirk, a 31-year-old Trump ally, was shot and killed on Wednesday while speaking at a university in Utah. The incident has sparked strong reactions across the political spectrum, with responses continuing to pour in.
Panic erupted at Utah Valley University on Wednesday, 10th September, when a single gunshot turned a public speaking event into a scene of horror. 31-year-old Charlie Kirk, a conservative commentator and one of President Donald Trump's closest allies, was struck fatally in the neck while addressing students.
Oh my God.
The Utah event was the opening night of Kirk's American Comeback Tour, a 15-campus series designed to spark debate among young Americans. At Utah Valley University, however, it became his final appearance.
Basically, I just heard a shot, and I saw him falling towards the left, so I knew he got shot on the collarbone or the neck right here, but I didn't see bleed immediately. I just saw and I heard, and we all crouched down.
It's traumatizing for the students. When I saw students running off from the campus over the bridge there, a lot of them were crying. It was traumatizing for everyone, and now the campus is closed.
Kirk was rushed from the scene as terrified spectators ducked for cover. Some even jumped into a fountain. Emergency crews and SWAT teams responded quickly. As the investigation unfolded, officials offered conflicting reports. The shooting unfolded before a crowd of about 3,000 people. FBI Director Kash Patel said a suspect was in custody, while Utah State Police said the gunman remained at large. An early arrest, George Zinn, was later dismissed as a mistaken identity. At Timpanogos Regional Hospital, where Kirk was pronounced dead, supporters gathered in mourning.
I'm here because free speech shouldn't be violated, because we shouldn't murder each other as Americans. We should listen to each other.
The fact that Charlie Kirk had to die because of his beliefs is just truly heartbreaking.
President Donald Trump also spoke out about political divisions in the country that have fueled violence.
Charlie was a patriot who devoted his life to the cause of open debate and the country that he loved so much, the United States of America. My administration will find each and every one of those who contributed to this atrocity and to other political violence, including the organizations that fund it and support it, as well as those who go after our judges, law enforcement officials, and everyone else who brings order to our country.
Former Presidents Barack Obama and Joe Biden, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and international leaders also condemned the attack. Charlie Kirk was a polarizing figure. On campuses and across social media, he divided opinion sharply. To supporters, he was a fearless defender of free speech, conservative values, and Donald Trump's vision for America. To critics, he was a provocateur, accused of fueling division and promoting a confrontational political agenda. Kirk rose from a suburban Chicago childhood to become founder of Turning Point USA, a conservative youth movement that reshaped campus politics and played a key role in Trump's 2024 election campaign.
Now, families and officials gathered in New York on Thursday to mark the 24th anniversary of the September 11 attacks. At One World Trade Center, relatives entered the barricaded memorial area to lay flowers, carrying photographs, and read the names of loved ones lost. At the same time, the National September 11th Memorial and Museum in Lower Manhattan hosted the annual ceremony, where thousands listened as the full list of victims was read aloud. Both ceremonies paid tribute to nearly 3,000 people killed in the attacks and acknowledged the continuing toll that 9/11 has to this day. Remaining with the tragic events, we take a look back at the incident that shocked the world 24 years ago.
May God bless the victims, their families, and America.
On September 11th, 2001, the world watched in horror as hijacked passenger planes tore through the Twin Towers of New York's World Trade Center, the Pentagon in Washington, and brought down United Flight 93 in a Pennsylvania field. Nearly 3,000 people were killed in the deadliest terrorist attack on American soil. Families, first responders, and ordinary citizens scarred by the tragedy. The images of that day, the collapsing towers, the panic in the streets, and the desperate rush to escape remain etched in memory. President George W. Bush, first informed of the attacks while visiting a school in Florida, vowed that terrorism against America would not stand as the nation entered a new uncertain chapter.
Terrorism against our nation will not stand.
The attacks claimed by Al-Qaeda reshaped the world, sparking the US-led war on terror, the invasion of Afghanistan, and later the war in Iraq. Conflicts that defined a generation and claimed countless more lives. 24 years on, the world pauses once again to honor the dead.
Keep walking, guys, keep walking.
Following Russian drones entering Polish airspace, Prime Minister Donald Tusk has called on NATO to take the threat seriously, while European allies pledge support and Poland strengthens cooperation with Ukraine on counter-drone defense.
Poland has closed all border crossings with Belarus over security concerns tied to Russia-Belarus military drills. The Interior Ministry said the measure took effect at 1 a.m. Thursday, covering road and rail routes. Belarus confirmed the notice, while Moscow called the move an unnecessary escalation harming trade. The closure followed a major scare on Wednesday when Polish air defences, backed by NATO aircraft, shot down several Russian drones that crossed its airspace. Polish Prime Minister said 19 drones were detected, with wreckage scattered across the countryside. After a National Security Council meeting on Thursday, he insisted Russia was responsible and urged NATO not to pretend nothing happened.
We don't think Russia is behind this provocation. We know it. However, I also understand that for all those who would like some kind of normalization, stabilization, some kind of policy of understanding with Russia, this situation is very uncomfortable. Because if what happened in the Polish skies on the night of September 10th is happening, it's hard to pretend that nothing happened. I hope that none of our allies will pretend that nothing happened, because it did happen.
Polish President Karol Nawrocki spoke with US President Donald Trump. Warsaw said NATO commitments were reaffirmed, though Trump suggested the incident might have been accidental.
Could have been a mistake. Could have been a mistake, but regardless, I'm not happy about anything having to do with that whole situation. But hopefully it's going to come to an end.
European leaders voiced strong support. France pledged 3 Rafale jets. Germany promised to step up NATO air policing and push for tougher EU sanctions. And Britain said it stood absolutely firm with Poland. The Netherlands and Czech Republic offered air defences, while EU Chief Kaja Kallas vowed to ramp up sanctions. Polish Prime Minister also confirmed backing from Sweden. In Kyiv, President Volodymyr Zelensky said Polish officers will undergo training in Ukraine on counter-drone warfare, calling the strikes a test of NATO's resolve. Russia denied responsibility, while Belarus claimed the drones may have strayed due to jamming. Warsaw rejected that, saying the threat was real and vowing to defend both its borders and NATO's eastern flank.
Moving to the latest diplomatic front in the war in Ukraine, as President Volodymyr Zelensky meets Donald Trump's top aide Keith Kellogg in Kyiv, with fighting intensifying and NATO nations drawn closer to the conflict. According to Ukraine's presidential office, Zelensky and Kellogg discussed providing Kyiv with additional weaponry and expanding the NATO-backed initiative to fund Patriot air defense systems. They also talked about a proposed $50 billion deal involving US weapons and Ukrainian drones and called for tougher sanctions on Russia. The talks come after Poland shot down Russian drones in its airspace, the first NATO engagement of Russian assets during the full-scale war. Staying with cooperation for Ukraine, Sweden has pledged an additional $7.5 billion in military aid to Ukraine over the next 2 years. The funds will go toward defense equipment, including more Archer artillery systems already in use by Ukrainian forces. Sweden's defense chief also reaffirmed Stockholm's commitment to regional security, saying Sweden is prepared to support Poland with military assets after a suspected Russian drone incursion into Polish airspace on Wednesday. Now, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky urged allies to rethink their air defences. At a joint press conference with Finnish President Alexander Stubb in Kyiv, Zelensky said countries such as Poland should explore multi-layered approaches to air defences as missile systems, like the US-made Patriot, were too expensive to use against cheaper Russian ones.
European friends and no one in the world has enough missiles to shoot down all different types of drones. A missile that costs $1 million, no matter how effective it is, simply cannot shoot down drones that cost tens of thousands of dollars. Even if it is $100,000, this is simply impossible.
What we saw yesterday will have a wider impact on Europe. Russian drones violated Poland's territorial integrity in a way that we have not yet seen.
Belarus has released 52 prisoners after US mediation following a meeting in Minsk between Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko and Donald Trump's envoy. The freed detainees have crossed into Lithuania as Washington eases sanctions on the Belarusian state airline.
Belarus freed 52 prisoners on Thursday following an appeal from US President Donald Trump. According to the American embassy in Vilnius, the group crossed into Lithuania alongside a US delegation that helped negotiate their release. Lithuanian President Gitanas Nausėda confirmed the transfer, calling it a great diplomatic success, but stressed that more than 1,000 political prisoners remain behind bars in Belarus.
There can be no exchange in this regard, so let's consider this as a certain positive message. Released by the people, and for us, the citizens of Lithuania, it is extremely important.
Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko told visiting Trump envoy John Cole in Minsk that the pardons included 14 foreign nationals, among them 6 Lithuanians, 2 Latvians, 2 Poles, 2 Germans, 1 French citizen, and 1 from the UK. During the meeting, Cole said Washington was lifting sanctions on Belarus's state airline, Belavia, allowing it to service and purchase Boeing aircraft parts. He also delivered a letter from Trump, signed simply Donald, in which the US President and First Lady Melania extended birthday wishes to Lukashenko. As a gift, Trump sent cufflinks engraved with the White House. Lukashenko, a close ally of Russian President Vladimir Putin, thanked Trump for what he called his remarkable efforts for peace and signalled willingness to pursue further agreements on prisoner releases. Despite the breakthrough, the release falls far short of the more than 1,300 detainees Trump has previously urged Lukashenko to free.
Over in Europe, thousands took to the streets in France under the slogan "Block Everything," disrupting transport and schools. Officials, hundreds were detained and several police officers injured, while organisers warned the protests are only just beginning.
Thousands took to the streets across France under the slogan "Block Everything," a protest movement that began online earlier this year. The demonstrations, fueled by social, economic, environmental and political grievances, expressed broad opposition to government policies. The movement first emerged on Telegram and is believed to be organised by the group Les Essentiels France. It has grown rapidly online, spreading to platforms like TikTok and X, with over 338,000 tweets about the movement shared in August alone. Known for its anti-EU and sovereigntist stance, the movement has gained widespread attention, with a majority of French citizens expressing support for its protests.
I'm here because this illegitimate government must be blocked. We don't want a war market, we don't want austerity. We want money for public services, we want money for schools, for hospitals.
The protests across France are driven by opposition to austerity, public spending cuts, Belarus' collapsed budget plan, Macron's economic policies, rising defence spending, and calls from unions and left-wing activists for more funding for public services, schools and hospitals.
It's the same. It's Macron who's the problem, not the ministers. He has to go. He has to think about it seriously.
It is reported that the French Interior Ministry had anticipated around 100,000 protesters and deployed 80,000 police and gendarmes across the country. By the end of the day, the ministry said 200,000 people had participated, while labour unions estimated the turnout at over 250,000. French Interior Minister Bruno Retailleau, speaking after a meeting to assess the day of protests, noting that the Block Everything protests had failed to bring the country to a standstill.
What are the major lessons to be learned from this very, very long day? It began at dawn and once again it continues. First, perhaps the thwarting of those who wanted to blockade the country. Well, we thwarted that strategy and France was not blocked by the blockaders.
Authorities reported hundreds of incidents across cities including Paris, Rennes, Nantes, Grenoble, Lyon, Lille, Caen and Toulouse. In the southwest, rail traffic was disrupted after power lines were cut, and many schools experienced delays or closures.
Staying with France, people across the country's overseas territories also took to the streets, voicing concerns over local issues and government policies, though turnout was smaller than on the mainland.
While mainland France saw tens of thousands take to the streets under the slogan "Block Everything," smaller-scale protests also took place across France's overseas territories. Citizens there joined in to voice their frustrations with government policies and local issues, though participation was lower compared to metropolitan France. On Réunion Island in the Indian Ocean, around 800 people blocked roads in a show of protest. Authorities report that 3 people, including a minor, were detained during the demonstrations. In French Guiana, roughly 20 people held a peaceful demonstration in the Souzini district. Meanwhile, in Martinique, over 300 protesters gathered in front of the prefecture to draw attention to local concerns, including corruption, shortages of doctors, and police violence. On Mayotte, the protests were largely symbolic, with a small group of teachers briefly gathering in front of a school before returning to work. Political parties in the overseas territories largely remained silent on the protests. However, Pro-independence groups criticised President Macron's appointment of Sébastien Lecornu as Prime Minister, referring to him as the Minister of Colonies, and warning that his appointment could worsen political tensions in the region. Loyalist forces, on the other hand, expressed full support for Lecornu. Analysts note that Lecornu's experience as former defence minister may mean more attention is paid to these strategically important territories. Reports suggest that one reason protests in the overseas territories remain smaller is the higher risk of detention for political activity. This demonstrates that, despite France's official motto of liberty, equality, fraternity, political expression and activism in these regions face real and ongoing challenges.
Turning to South America, Brazil's former President Jair Bolsonaro has been sentenced to 27 years and 3 months for attempting a coup. Bolsonaro, who led Brazil from 2019 to 2022, was found guilty on 5 charges. 3 judges convicted him, 1 voted to acquit, and 1 is yet to decide. The 70-year-old former president is currently under house arrest, and his lawyers plan to appeal the ruling. He did not attend the hearing in person. The trial has deeply divided Brazilian society, with some backing the verdict and others demanding his immediate release, while also attracting attention in the United States. Justice de Moraes accused Bolsonaro of leading a coup attempt and running a criminal organization. Despite his legal troubles and a ban on running for office until 2030, Bolsonaro remains an influential political figure, and his allies may seek amnesty through Congress. The case is expected to have long-lasting impacts on Brazilian politics. Now, Russia has shut down a secretive presidential directorate once charged with keeping former Soviet republics in Moscow's orbit. The closure follows a stream of leaks exposing espionage, corruption, and dwindling influence. A report by The Insider reveals the scale of the operations and the money involved.
Russia's Presidential Directorate for Interregional and Cultural Ties with Foreign Countries was set up in 2005 after Ukraine's Orange Revolution. Its official aim was cultural cooperation. In practice, insiders say it was a hub for intelligence and influence missions across Eastern Europe, the Caucasus and Central Asia. Leadership often came from the spy world. Early head Modest Kolarov had a background in political strategy and covert work. He was followed by figures like Nikolai Svetkov, Vladimir Chernov, Sergei Vinokurov, all linked to Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service, the SVR. Funding was on a massive scale. Internal papers seen by investigative outlet The Insider show hundreds of millions of dollars channeled over 2 decades. More than 100 million went to Azerbaijan alone for festivals, exhibitions, and media projects. Annual spending on Central Asia reached at least $50 million, with Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Uzbekistan named as priority targets. The methods were equally striking. Reports list at least 136 journalists and bloggers classified as agents of influence, some marked ours or ready to cooperate. Budgets covered media outlets, youth movements, and even banquets described by staff as drinking sessions. Results were mixed at best. In Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, military cooperation with Russia shrank sharply after 2022. Turkmenistan increased defense spending and signed new security deals beyond Moscow's reach. In Azerbaijan, where expensive events were meant to showcase partnership, relations cooled and Russian media such as Sputnik faced restrictions. By early 2025, as Russia's war in Ukraine drained resources and credibility, President Vladimir Putin ordered the directorate to be scrapped. Its tasks are now being folded into a new directorate for strategic partnership and cooperation under domestic policy chief Sergei Kirienko. Officials have 3 months to complete the handover, with key figures tied to past scandals barred from the new structure. The decision ends a 20-year experiment in covert cultural diplomacy that cost Russia hundreds of millions of dollars, delivered few allies, and exposed how the Kremlin's soft power ambitions often masked old-style espionage.
Looking to regional ties, Armenia's Parliament Speaker Alan Simonyan says economic ties and infrastructure are now central to the post-peace agenda with Azerbaijan. He signals a shift towards practical cooperation after years of regional tension.
Armenian Parliament Speaker Alen Simonyan has shared thoughts on future cooperation with Azerbaijan following the recent peace declaration signed in Washington. Speaking to journalists, Simonyan said it is understandable that Azerbaijan wants to avoid any future threats. He added that Armenia also has clear priorities, especially when it comes to unblocking regional transport and communication links.
In a very short period of time, Armenians and Azerbaijanis will be trading with each other, and we will have a common market of Armenian and Azerbaijani goods. Azerbaijani products will appear in our shops, while Armenian goods will be found in shops in Baku and other cities. It's inevitable. Armenians will go to buy cheaper petrol and come back.
Simonyan highlighted the importance of the so-called Trump route, a section of the Zangezur corridor that will run through Armenia. He suggested that Armenian companies could help build the railway and energy infrastructure along this route. He also said a joint Armenian-American organization will be responsible for managing these projects. Simonyan also addressed Armenia's security ties. He confirmed that Armenia is not planning to remove the Russian military base from its territory. According to him, Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan will travel to Russia soon and is expected to meet President Vladimir Putin. Recently, Armenian and Azerbaijani deputy prime ministers met in border areas last week. They discussed border delimitation, mine clearance, and plans for rebuilding infrastructure. These efforts aim to support the peace deal signed in August, which was mediated by US President Donald Trump.
Over in Turkey, international credit rating agency Fitch has raised the country's economic growth forecast for 2025 from 2.9 to 3.5%. Growth is expected to stay steady in the next year and climb to 4.2% by 2027. Fitch expects Turkey's inflation to drop to 28% by the end of this year and continue falling to 21% in 2026 and 19% by 2027. The central bank is also expected to ease monetary policy. Focusing on international ties in the region, Georgia is facing mounting questions over its foreign policy direction. While its neighbors deepen ties with both Washington and Beijing, Tbilisi's growing partnership with China is drawing criticism from Western allies. It all comes against the backdrop of fresh tensions between Georgia and the EU. Our correspondent has more.
Tbilisi Mayor Kaha Kaladze has defended Georgia's deepening cooperation with China, calling it a strategic and economic necessity. He answered to critics, saying that closer ties are welcomed, noting that engagement with Beijing is a broader regional trend rather than a Georgian exception. That point is supported by recent moves from Georgia's neighbors. Both Azerbaijan and Armenia have expanded their relationships with China in recent months, while at the same time signing historic agreements in the United States. Washington has praised those steps as a progress toward regional stability, leaving some in Tbilisi asking why Georgia's outreach to China is viewed so differently. One possible answer lies on the Black Sea coast. The planned unclear deep-sea port is seen as strategically vital, and reports suggest a US-sanctioned Chinese company could be among the potential investors. That prospect has raised concern in Washington and Brussels, where the focus is less on trade and more on long-term security implications. This issue was even the subject of a hearing today at the US Helsinki Commission, pointedly titled "From Partner to Problem: Georgia's Anti-American Detour." The debate also comes amid wider diplomatic strain. Georgia has rejected criticism from European partners, most recently in a dispute with German ambassador in Tbilisi. Berlin defended its envoy and warned that aggressive rhetoric could damage relations, adding another layer of tension to Georgia's foreign policy landscape. Kaladze's message was clear. Georgia values its partnership with China and will continue on that path. But the country now faces the delicate task of balancing these ties with the expectations of its Western allies. It's Nini Nikolaishvili reporting from Tbilisi, A News.
Now, Azerbaijani Foreign Minister Ceyhun Bayramov and his Uzbek counterpart Bakhtiar Saidov held a phone call to discuss expanding cooperation. The Uzbek Foreign Minister wrote on X that both sides reaffirmed their commitment to deepening strategic ties and strengthening cooperation based on historical bonds and mutual interests. Turning to Central Asia, as the European Union weighs new sanctions on Russia, Brussels is reportedly considering using its so-called anti-circumvention tool for the first time against Kazakhstan. Kazakh officials say they haven't received official notice and continue to engage in dialogue with the EU. Our Fariza Kalimazina reports.
Kazakhstan has responded to a Bloomberg report claiming that the European Union may, for the first time, apply a so-called anti-circumvention tool against the country. The article refers to the development of the European Union's 19th package of sanctions against Russia. And according to Bloomberg sources, the package may target around 6 Russian banks, energy companies, as well as include measures against payment systems, also cryptocurrency exchanges and additional oil trade schemes. A separate part of the Bloomberg report focuses on Kazakhstan. The agency, citing sources within European institutions, says Brussels is considering a possible ban on exporting certain types of equipment to Kazakhstan. According to the EU, this equipment is then redirected to Russia and used in the defense industry. However, such a measure would require strong evidence and unanimous approval from all EU member states. Bloomberg calls this an anti-circumvention mechanism, stressing that formally it's not a sanction against Kazakhstan, but a trade restriction on specific goods. Still, in practice, this tool is viewed as part of the EU's wider sanctions policy. Meanwhile, Kazakhstan's Minister of Trade and Integration stated that as of now, the country has not received any official notifications from the European Union regarding the possible application of such a mechanism. The ministry stressed that Kazakhstan maintains ongoing dialogue with its European partners. For instance, previous negotiations helped resolve the issue of transiting Kazakh coal through Russian ports and led to its exemption from EU restrictions. According to the ministry, similar efforts will be made in other areas with an emphasis on transparency in foreign trade, protection of national interests, and ensuring trade resilience. The ministry also reaffirmed that Kazakhstan consistently fulfills its international obligations and takes measures to prevent the use of its territory for sanction evasion. Meanwhile, Reuters, citing EU sources, reports that the upcoming sanctions package may include banks from 2 Central Asian countries, while the specific nations are not named. The agency also reports that the European Commission is considering adding independent Chinese oil refineries to the 19th sanctions package, but no specific companies were identified. The new sanctions package could be presented as early as September 12th. Secondary EU sanctions could put Kazakhstan in a tough spot as it tries to balance its strategic partnership with Europe while maintaining strong economic ties with Russia. For the European Union, Kazakhstan remains a key transit route that bypasses Russia and an important source of raw materials, including rare earth metals and uranium. That's why Brussels is unlikely to push for a full break in relations. However, Kazakh experts say the pressure on Astana to align more closely with EU sanctions policy is expected to grow. From Almaty, Kazakhstan, Fariza Kalimurzina, A News.
Now, trade deals worth nearly $2 million were signed between Afghanistan's private sector and Kazakhstan's national food contract company. The agreements are set to allow for transport of key goods to support Afghanistan's food market. Artemim Habbahis has more.
A high-level meeting was held between Afghanistan's private sector representatives and Kazakhstan's national food contract company. The gathering was attended by Afghanistan's Minister of Industry and Commerce, Nuruddin Azizi, alongside Kazakh Ambassador Gaziz Akbasov. During the talks, Minister Azizi highlighted the importance of enhancing trade ties, setting an ambitious target of boosting the trade volume between the two nations to $3 billion. At the conclusion of the meeting, agreements worth 133 million Afghanis, equivalent to almost $2 million were signed. These deals will pave the way for the import of nearly 600,000 tons of essential goods from Kazakhstan. The shipments are expected to include flour, wheat, flax and soya beans, key supplies that will help support Afghanistan's food market. Officials say the new agreements mark an important step toward economic cooperation, with both countries aiming to expand trade opportunities in the months ahead. This is Tamim Bahis in Kabul for A News.
That's the news update from us in Baku this morning. Stay tuned to A News for more.